Hey everybody, it's Chris here. So I'm going to be doing some tier rankings for every single feat in 5th edition D&D. There's 105 of them. Not going to do 105 today. What I'm going to be starting with today is ranking the Player's Handbook feats. And this is going to be a two-parter, so we're going to be doing the first half of the Player's Handbook feats today, and then the second half in my next video. And the method I'll be using is each trait of a feat is going to be assigned a certain amount of points. They're going to be added together, and then I'm going to be ranking them along with all the rest of the feats in the game. I went over the system in my preview video, which I am going to link up above for you. That said, no time to waste. Let's start ranking feats. The Actor feat. Alright, so the Actor feat gives you basically three different things. Number one, it's going to give you a +1 to Charisma. That's worth 20 points. Then it's going to give you advantage on Charisma Deception and Charisma Performance checks while trying to pass yourself off as a different person. So these are two very specific uses for two specific ability checks. Those are both ribbons, total of 4 points. And you can mimic the speech of another person or the sounds made by other creatures. You must have heard the person speaking or heard the creature make the sound for at least a minute. And anyone you interact with gets a Wisdom Insight check, contested by your Charisma Deception check to notice the deception. And that's a decent feature. I gave it 15 points. That means Actor in total is going to get 39 points. And 39 points is enough for C tier. So we're starting middle of the road. Next feat is Alert. So Alert gives you three different things. First, it's going to give you a +5 bonus to Initiative. That is a fantastic feature, and so that is worth an impressive 36 points out of 50 possible. And second, you cannot be surprised. That's fairly useful, so that's 16 points. And other creatures don't get advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. And that's okay. It doesn't come up all that much, so I gave it 10 points. But you add all three together, and that's 62 points for Alert. And that is an S tier rank for the Alert feat. Next feat up is Athlete. So Athlete actually gives us 4 different things. First, we can take a +1 to either Strength or Dexterity, and that's worth 22 points. You get a little bit more because they gave us a choice. You get up from prone using only 5 feet of your movement. That's just a ribbon feature. I gave it 3 points. Climbing doesn't cost extra movement. So essentially, it's a climbing speed equal to your walking speed. I don't know why they didn't just say that. I imagine that'll be amended in the revised rules. But that's mechanically what it's going to be. And that's okay. It's worth 10 points. And you can make a running long jump or running high jump after moving only 5 feet on foot rather than 10 feet. That's mostly a ribbon. Pretty good ribbon, I guess. So 8 points for that. Add them all up, that's 43 points. And 43 points is enough for Athlete to get B tier. That's what happens with half feats. Just that +1 to ability score makes a big difference. Next, we have the Charger feat. So Charger actually only gives you 2 things. First, if you use your action to dash, you can make a bonus action to make either one melee weapon attack or shove a creature. And second, if you move at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before taking this bonus action, which I would imagine isn't too hard, you're going to gain either a +5 bonus to the attack's damage roll, or you can push the target up to 10 feet away from you. Normally you can only push them 5 feet. And I gotta be honest, neither of these are fantastic. I think they barely qualify as more than ribbons, and so they're both worth 10 points. Add them together, that's 20 points. And Charger's going to be our first feat that's going to land in F tier. So next up we have the famous Crossbow Expert feat. Easily one of the feats I see taken most often, and there's good reason for it. We're going to get 3 different features here. First, we're going to get rid of the loading property of crossbows. And if we're going to be using crossbows and we're going to be attacking more than once per round, we definitely want to do that. And that's worth 15 points. Second, being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. And that's pretty good. I'd say worth 15. But the premier feature of Crossbow Expert is the third bullet point. When you use the attack action and attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow you're holding. So what this means is we are going to get a bonus action attack every time we take the attack action. There's only 2 feats in the game that are going to give you a bonus action attack every time you take the attack action. And Crossbow Expert is the only one that allows you to do it at range, which is of greater value as far as I'm concerned. It's also the only one that doesn't reduce the damage of the bonus action attack. So when it comes to feat traits, this is pretty much as good as it gets. So it gets the maximum 50 points. So 50 plus 15 plus 15, we have a total of 80 for Crossbow Expert. And so it is going to go up to S tier, and it's going to bump alert. So I got to put it on the other side there. There we go, bump alert to the next spot. Next we have Defensive Duelist. We can see there's a prerequisite here for Dexterity 13 or higher. I am not taking prerequisites into account at all for these rankings. If you think they should be taken into account, then adjust the rankings for yourself as you think is appropriate. For me, I think if you're even considering this feat, you probably already have the Dexterity of 13 or higher, so it's not a big deal. When you are wielding a finesse weapon for which you are proficient and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class for that attack, potentially causing the attack to miss you. So there's only one feature here. Now, I will say it's a pretty good feature. Yeah, we can say something like the shield spell is better, because the shield spell is better. However, the shield spell is using up resources. Defensive Duelist is something you could do round after round after round. Now, it only works against one attack, so that's a bit of a disadvantage, and you have to be wielding a finesse weapon, so that's a fairly major restriction. But still a very good feature, and I gave it 37 points. But here's the thing, it's 37 points, and there's nothing else on there, so Defensive Duelist actually only makes D tier. And what it tells me is Defensive Duelist really should have an ability score increase on there. You should get a +1 to Dexterity with Defensive Duelist, and then it would score much better. So next up we have Dual Wielder. This gives us 3 features. So with Dual Wielder, we're talking about somebody who's using 2-weapon fighting. And the first feature is, basically if you're 2-weapon fighting, you're going to get a +1 bonus to armor class. +1 bonus to armor class is good. It's worth 20 points. Secondly, we can use 2-weapon fighting even when the one-handed melee weapons you are wielding aren't light, and this is usually going to be about an extra point of damage for each weapon. So you're normally going from D6s to D8s. There's very specific situations like if you are mounted and then you're wielding 2 lances, which is technically possible with the 2014 rules. Doesn't look like it'll be possible with the revised rules later this year. Then it could be a whole lot more, though it's a little silly. You can talk to your DM about wielding 2 lances, I think. But most of the time we're talking 1 point of damage per weapon, so that's worth 10 points. And then you can draw or stow 2 one-handed weapons when you would normally be able to draw or stow only 1, and that is a big problem for 2-weapon fighters, or one of the big problems for 2-weapon fighters is that the interact rules only allow you to draw 1 weapon on your turn. So if you want to use 2 weapons, but you haven't got them already drawn, it can be a big problem. So this does solve that. It's unfortunate this issue exists at all, and it does look like that's going to be changed in the revised rules as well. But for now, this is your only real way to work around that. And so it's worth 10 points. And so 20 plus 10 plus 10 gives us a total of 40, and that'll land us in C tier right ahead of the Actor feat. And that brings us to Dungeon Delver. Here's a feat I never see anyone take. Alright, so it technically gives us 4 things. We get advantage on Wisdom, Perception, and Intelligence investigation checks made to detect the presence of secret doors. That's really, really specific, super ribbon. 2 and 2, that's 4 points total. Then we get advantage on saving throws made to avoid or resist traps. I mean, in certain campaigns this might come up a lot, in other campaigns hardly at all. In the end, I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a ribbon, so I'm giving it 5 points. And then we have resistance to the damage dealt by traps, same thing. Middle of the road ribbon feature, 5 points. And then traveling at a fast pace doesn't impose the normal -5 penalty on your passive wisdom perception score. Again, I think this is a ribbon. And middle of the road, another 5 points. So 4 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, that's 19 points. And Dungeon Delver ends up in F, and it's worse than Charger. Our next feat is Durable, and it's going to give us a +1 to our Constitution score, and that's good, but it's worth 20 points because we don't get any choice. And then when we roll a hit die to regain hit points, the minimum number of hit points you regain from the roll is equal to twice your Constitution modifier. That means, technically speaking, depending what you roll, this may not change a result at all. But if we have a good Constitution score, at least it's ensuring that when we use hit dice on a short rest, we will get value out of every single one that we roll, which is okay. So I think it's worth 15 points. So 20 plus 15 gives us 35. So not great. Lands us in D tier and behind Defensive Duelist. And next we have Elemental Adept. So when we take Elemental Adept, we need to pick one of the damage types available, is Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder. And we get two features here. So we have spells, you cast ignore resistance to the damage of the chosen type. And second, when we roll damage for a spell we cast that deals damage of that type, we treat any 1 on a damage die as 2. And the second bullet point here isn't really a feature. It just says we can select multiple times if we choose a different damage type. So, of the two features we do get, ignoring resistance can be really good. I mean, a lot of creatures are resistant to fire damage, for example. And if we are going to specialize in a damage type, we probably want to ignore that resistance. I think that's worth 25 points. The treating 1s as 2s, that's not very good. I mean, it really should be a reroll. So this is going to be a very minor increase to damage. So I figure it's a ribbon, maybe a little bit above average. I give it 6 points for a total of 31 points for Elemental Adept, which unfortunately is not enough to get it out of F tier. It is ahead of Charger and Dungeon Delver though. And that brings us to the infamous Grappler feat. Now what I will say is the Grappler feat is not a good feat, but what I'll also say is it probably is better than some people say it is. Alright, so we're essentially getting two things here. We're getting advantage on attack rolls against a creature we are grappling, and number 2, we can use our action to try to pin a creature grappled by us. To do so, make another grapple check. If you succeed, you and the creature are both restrained until the grapple ends. So a lot of critique for this feat is suggesting that it is utterly useless, because if you grapple a creature, you can then shove it prone, and if you shove it prone, you're going to have advantage on attack rolls against it already, so the first bullet point is kind of useless, and second, we already have advantage on attacks against that creature if we've shoved it prone, so why do we need it restrained? And then it restrains us as well, which gives us disadvantage on our attack rolls, and them advantage to attack us, so it kind of cancels everything out. So that's the complaints I hear. Here's what I'll say in its defense. If you grapple a creature, shoving it prone is another attack. With Grappler, you don't need to make that second attack to get advantage on the attack roll. So I don't think that's useless. I don't think it's great, but I think it's maybe worth 10 points. And then the second thing I should say is, yes, if I can have a creature prone and grappled, and I'm attacking with melee, and they're attacking with melee, I would rather have that than have us both restrained. But we aren't an island. And the fact is we might have characters in our party that are shooting ranged weapons. They actually don't want the creature that I'm grappling to be prone. And if I can restrain that creature, I can still grant them advantage. And yes, it makes me a bigger target, but often when you're a grappler, you want to be the bigger target anyway. So I don't think the second feature is useless. I don't think it's great though, so it's only worth 10 points. But 10 plus 10 is 20, and that's definitely F tier. But you know what? It does put it slightly ahead of Dungeon Delver. On to the Great Weapon Master feat. So lots of people take this feat. We're essentially getting two features. The first is, on your turn, when you score a critical hit with a melee weapon, or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with one, you can make one melee weapon attack as a bonus action. So we're getting bonus action attacks. We're not getting them every time we take the attack action, but we're probably getting them close to half the time. I figure that's worth 23 points. And then, of course, the -5 to hit for plus 10 damage. This is a big deal, especially if you have a lot of attacks, and especially if you have a lot of attacks with advantage. And so, yeah, it can end up being a lot of damage if you know when to use it and how to make the most of it, and so it's worth 40 points. So 23 plus 40 is a total of 63 for Great Weapon Master, which brings it to S tier, and right in between Crossbow Expert and Alert. There we go. Next up, the Healer feat. So we get 2 bullet points here First, when we use a healer's kit to stabilize a dying creature, that creature also regains 1 hit point. And so that can be used as many times as you have charges on healer's kits. Healer's kits, I believe, have 10 uses each. And of course, you can buy multiple healer's kits. And so if you can get to the downed character and stabilize them, you're bringing them back to consciousness with an action. That's quite good. It's worth 25 points. And then, as an action, you can spend 1 use of your healer's kit to tend to a creature and restore a d6 plus 4 hit points to it, plus additional hit points equal to the creature's maximum number of hit dice. And they can't regain hit points again that way until they finish a short or long rest. That's actually a fair amount of healing, and so that's reasonably good as well, worth another 25 points. Add them both together, and we have a solid 50 points for healer. That is enough to be A tier. And our next feat is heavily armored. So this gives us 2 things. The first is we increase our strength score by 1 to a maximum of 20. And so +1 to an ability score, but no choice. That's worth 20 points. And then we're going to get proficiency with heavy armor. And I don't think proficiency with heavy armor is all that valuable, considering that we already have medium armor when we took the heavily armored feat. The only real case where it makes that much of a difference is if you have a character that has high strength and then like low dexterity, then you really want heavy armor proficiency if you don't already. You probably have it already with that kind of character, but in that case, you do kind of need it. So I gave it 15 points. I think that's reasonable. So the +1 strength is 20, and then the proficiency for 15 is a total of 35. And that technically ties it with durable. I'm just going to put it to the right. And that brings us to Heavy Armor Master. So we get 2 features here. The first is we increase our strength score by 1. We know that's worth 20 points. And then the second trait, if we're wearing heavy armor, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that we take from non-magical attacks is reduced by 3. Now, it kind of sucks that it's only non-magical attacks, because we got to constantly ask our DM, are these attacks treated as magical or not? And some creatures are, and some creatures aren't. Most aren't. And the 3 reduction is sure a lot at low levels, and it's sure not a lot at high levels, so I don't think this scales particularly well, but at low levels, it's actually pretty dramatic. So I do think it's worth a solid 25 points, and that gives it 45 points altogether. And that brings it to B tier, and it is ahead of Athlete. And next we have Inspiring Leader. So we can spend 10 minutes inspiring our companions, shoring up the resolve to fight. When we do so, choose up to 6 friendly creatures, which can include yourself, within 30 feet of you, who can see or hear you, and who can understand you. Each creature gains temporary hit points equal to our level, plus our charisma modifier, and a creature can't gain temporary hit points from this feat again until it's finished a short or long rest. So there's a couple little tidbits that some players don't know about here that I should probably share. So first off, yeah, when you see 6 friendly creatures, the first thing you think are the PCs. But we can absolutely inspire any creature that can see and understand us. So the Paladin's Found Steed can understand us, so it's going to get the temporary hit points. NPCs can get the temporary hit points. Pets can get the temporary hit points, as long as they understand the Inspiring Leader. You can even inspire animals, you just need to have the Speak with Animals spell. The second little tidbit here is it says you choose up to 6 friendly creatures, and they can't benefit again until they have finished a short or long rest. That doesn't mean we can't only do this once per short or long rest. So if we have 12 companions, we can give them all temporary hit points. We just have to do 2 sessions of 10 minutes, inspiring one half of them and then inspiring the other half. And so this is very, very good. And I am giving it 48 out of a maximum of 50 points. The problem is, there's only 1 feature here. So the total for Inspiring Leader is 48 points, and that is enough to bring it to the top of B tier. So it's ahead of Heavy Armor Master. Get over there. Get over there. There we go. Next up, we have Keen Mind. So Keen Mind is going to give us a +1 to our intelligence score. That's worth 20 points. We always know which way is north. Whoop-de-doo. That's worth 2 points. You always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset. Whoop-de-doo. That's worth 2 points. You can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. Now, it depends how far you take this. Like, I've heard claims this means you could copy a key you've seen or something like that. I don't know about that. You can talk to your DM. Overall, I think Recall is fine, 15 points. Add it all together and Keen Mind is worth 39. That is enough for C tier, and it is tied with the Actor feat. Next up, we have Lightly Armored. So first, we can increase our Strength or Dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20. That's worth 22 points because they're giving us a bit of choice there. And we're going to get Proficiency with Light Armor. I don't think that's very useful. If your character is not already proficient in light armor, there's a very good chance they have some way to improve their unarmored defense. So there's just so few characters that are actually going to benefit from light armor proficiency. I can't say it's a ribbon, so I'm going to give it 10, so it's just barely over a ribbon. So we have 22 plus 10, total of 32 for lightly armored. And 32 lands it in F tier. It's just at the very top of F tier. If you think the armor proficiency was worth 1 more point, it would have snuck into D tier. Alright, so next is Linguist. So we're going to get a +1 to our intelligence score. That's worth 20 points. We learn 3 languages of our choice. I don't think that's very valuable at all. First off, we get a ton of languages, or we tend to get a ton of languages anyways. Secondly, there's so many ways in the game to communicate without language, like often telepathy, you don't need to share language. Then we have things like comprehend languages, which is a ritual. Languages just are not valuable at all. So I gave it 3 points. And then we have the ability to create written ciphers. This is so circumstantial. I gave it 3 points as well. So we have 20 plus 3 plus 3 is 26 total. And that's going to put it between Elemental Adept and Charger in F tier. And now to a feat we know isn't going to be F tier. Lucky. So you have 3 luck points, and then there's 2 different things you can do with them. First, you can re-roll an attack roll, an ability check, or saving throw, and you can do that after the roll is made. And second, we can spend 1 luck point when attack roll is made against us, and then we can roll a d20, then we choose which one the attacker has to use. So the re-rolling stuff is good, 35 points for that. And the using it on attacks against yourself, I mean, that's really useful, especially like just for negating crits. That's also worth 35 points. Add them together, that's 70 points. That's enough for S tier, and it's behind Crossbow Expert, but it's ahead of Great Weapon Master. And that brings us to the Mage Slayer feat. So we're getting 3 things with Mage Slayer. First, when a creature within 5 feet of us casts a spell, we can use our reaction to make 1 melee weapon attack against that creature. That is fairly rare and okay. It's worth 10 points. And then when you damage a creature that is concentrating on a spell, it has disadvantage on the saving throw it makes to maintain its concentration. That's a little bit better. I'd say that's worth 15 points. And you have advantage on saving throws against spells cast by creatures within 5 feet of us. That restriction is pretty severe, but, you know, it's still alright. It's worth 13 points. Add those 3 together and we have a total of 38. And that is enough to squeak into C tier. And it is behind the other 3 up there right now. And that is the first half of the feats in the Player's Handbook. So join me in my next video where I will go over the next half of the feats in the Player's Handbook. And we will move on from there. Thanks everyone for joining me. And until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.